Section 1. History. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. The days of my life, all prepared before I'd even lived one day. Psalm 139, 15 and 16. Chapter 1. Working Mom. The mother's heart is the child's schoolroom. Henry Ward Beecher. January 18th, 1966, Johnson City, Tennessee.
There's something wrong with her eyes. The normal commotion of a delivery room abruptly halted as the obstetrician and nurses noticed my eyes, severely crossed so that only the white showed. The news crushed my parents, Jim and Carol Parker. They struggled to comprehend the heartbreaking report about their new baby girl. In my very first moments on this planet, conversations about me declared an imperfection, a disability, a flaw. By simply entering into the world, I thrust open a door to heartache and sorrow. Arriving with absolutely no control or choice, my presence alone served as a reminder of a broken world and as a catalyst for people around me to question the goodness and will of God. Trying to push past the disappointment of my eyes, my parents, grandparents, and big sister did their best to be excited about my arrival. Borrowing a name from each grandmother, my family welcomed Mary Grace Parker into their little home in Elizabethton, Tennessee. My maternal grandmother's first name was Othella, and I'm still grateful they chose to bless me with her middle name, Grace. My mother wanted to nickname me Marcy, but it didn't stick. Thank God. Being Southerners, my full name was frequently used, but eventually everyone settled on Gracie. My name, however, was often quickly glossed over as attention naturally focused on my defectiveness when presenting me to others. Almost like a caveat with every introduction. Here's little Mary Grace. Isn't it sad about her eyes? Barely having time to explore my crib at our home in Elizabethton, my world was quickly framed by doctors and hospitals, and would be so for the rest of my life. Unprepared for this daunting challenge, my young parents experienced an even greater anxiety over the uncertainty of what was actually wrong with my eyes. What was her condition? Was she mentally challenged? Would little Mary Grace ever see properly? These and many other questions plagued them as they frantically visited doctor after doctor, uneasily searching for answers. With the bills mounting, Daddy's parents helped ease some of the financial load for us as my mother and father grew increasingly overwhelmed, floundering in a medical world they did not understand. Beginning at only 3 months old, we trekked through the South seeking answers to the dilemma of Mary Grace and her horrible crossed eyes. To the relief of all, my father's cousin, a neurosurgeon, connected us with a specialist in Miami who correctly diagnosed the problem. Once everybody understood my condition, he referred us to Dr. McKee at the McKee-Wilson Eye Hospital in East Tennessee, where he successfully operated on my eyes. This renowned clinic is now known as the Johnson City Specialty Hospital. My first operation occurred at the young age of 14 months. During my initial assessment, doctors discovered many peripheral muscles that were undeveloped or not even there. Pulling and tying different muscles to compensate, Dr. McKee successfully treated my right eye first. Before starting first grade, I endured 4 eye operations, as well as the seemingly endless recoveries that followed. In order to strengthen my left eye, the doctor forced me to wear a patch over the right one, along with peculiar-looking horn-rimmed glasses. Clearly not the fashion accessory parents hoped to provide for their little girl. Shortly before my 3rd birthday, Daddy chose to leave the job security in his parents' car dealership and launch out on his own. Packing up our small family and relocating to the panhandle of northwest Florida, we settled in the obscure little town of Navarre, Florida, which is nestled near Fort Walton Beach and Eglin Air Force Base. Highway 98 wove through Navarre, but wasn't even paved through the sparsely populated area at that time. Traveling west on 98 led to Pensacola, and Fort Walton Beach lay to the east. More than a decade earlier, my grandparents had purchased a parcel of land surrounding this sparsely settled area, land which Daddy determined to develop. In many respects, Daddy was born a century too late. He has the heart of a pioneer. Uprooting his wife and 2 daughters, leaving a steady job and a settled town, we plopped into a fledgling community with only 50 families and lived for nearly a year in a tiny, only 14 feet long, Shasta travel trailer, while Daddy set out to build a career as a real estate developer. Building a mobile home park on the property by themselves, my parents moved us into the back of the park's new laundry and recreation hall. We still cooked meals in the travel trailer, and then eventually into a 60-foot mobile home, which seemed like a palace after the Shasta camper. Moving to Florida did not lessen the challenges of my life. The eye condition, not quite resolved at that point, required frequent trips back to Johnson City to see Dr. McKee, who operated on me 3 more times before entering grade school. Despite progressive treatments, most of my baby pictures were posed in profile, and a self-image of defectiveness slowly took shape. My older sister Andrea grew more beautiful with long, flowing brown hair, always nicely held by pretty bows and clips. In contrast, due to multiple surgeries and patches, and for whatever other reasons, my hair was chopped off into a bob. In so many of my earlier pictures, I looked like a boy. Naturally, my personality seemed to adapt to this tomboy persona, and I fell in love with the outdoors, adventure, and especially getting sweaty and dirty. Although outwardly reveling in tomboyish fun, I recall crying often and feeling different and ostracized, rarely playing with other children due to being frequently ridiculed and called names. I spent a great deal of time alone. Every night, I prayed for God to miraculously heal my eyes while I slept, yet awoke each morning to the hateful condition of a defect, living the reality over and over. "Mommy, am I cross-eyed?" Tears brimmed when I asked my mother after hearing other kids tease me. Broken-hearted, her eyes also filled with tears as pain and sadness darkened her face. And if you ask her today, the hurt is still apparent. Understandably, that teasing, as well as increased learning challenges, contributed to a defensive attitude early on and helped form what would become an incredibly forceful personality. Discouragement and challenges either cripple a person or help build fortitude. The problem with fortitude building, however, is that it's rarely a smooth road. Potholes of defiance often wreak havoc along the journey and lead to some absurd decisions. Once, not even 5 years old, I became angry with my parents over something stupid. So I packed up my miniature, flowery, and polka-dotted little suitcase, and I ran away from home to marry the then teenage superstar Donny Osmond. In my suitcase, along with toys and dolls, I had a magazine with Donny's picture on the cover. I didn't pack food or clothes. I just assumed Donny would take care of all of those things. Of course, I didn't know Donny's address, but the magazine article mentioned that he lived in Utah, and I knew it was somewhere past Pensacola. Only getting about 100 yards down the road on Highway 98, the local sheriff discovered an extremely determined little girl heading west. Knowing my family, my father served as a deputy sheriff for the rural community, the officer loaded me into a squad car and drove me home. All the while trying to stifle laughter at the incredibly defiant preschooler with the Donny Osmond crush. Thankfully, Northwest Florida in the early 70s was much safer than today's world, and I'm so grateful my childhood rebellion only resulted in embarrassment, and after recovering from the hurt feelings of my attempt to run away, my family had a good laugh. I never did meet Donny Osmond. I have met presidents of the United States, but just can't seem to meet Donny Osmond. And they call it puppy love. If you don't know that song, well, you're just not a faithful Donny Osmond fan. The physical challenges of my eyes complicated my education. In the early 70s, special needs programs were still in the infant stages. Many children with learning disabilities sadly landed in a catch-all special ed class. Assuming my difficulties in learning indicated a slow learner, my teachers followed suit, and they simply transferred me in and out of special education classes. Gratefully, before my entire life could be not only shaped, but pretty much ruined by such a decision, a remarkable teacher with her own challenging path, Frida Lloyd, intervened and properly assessed my situation. Feeling relief that someone else understood the journey, my mom hung on every word from Mrs. Lloyd as the two of them met to discuss what to do with little Mary Grace. Listening with rapt attention as she recounted her personal trials of refusing to accept the current education system's path for her own son, who also had a learning disability, my mother felt a glimmer of hope, someone to help sort through the unfamiliar issues that now confronted her family. Admirably, at her own expense, Mrs. Lloyd traveled to Miami to glean strategies in cutting-edge educational programs designed specifically for children with special needs and learning disabilities. She incorporated her newfound skills into her own son's life and providentially into the lives of other children in our small community. And thank God, mine. I remain amazed at how God uses one person's heartache as not only a catalyst in their own life, but in the lives of so many others. At critical moments, what seemed to present as a burden for one family served as a springboard to help other families. Over my 40-something years, I've observed that pattern repeating countless times in the lives of others I meet, as in my own. By intervening in my life, Frida Lloyd, a dedicated mother and teacher, would touch a great many lives, and I believe the highest honor you can give teachers is to acknowledge the impact they make in the time they devoted to you. As in the case of accurately diagnosing my eyes and my learning disability, teachers properly assessing my learning issues helped my mom and dad feel a huge relief from the burden of all the uncertainty. They also took a great deal of comfort discovering others were successfully navigating this path. Grasping a great truth, my parents discovered that when life presents challenges, often painful ones, connecting with others who understand and walk the same journey can bring an extraordinary sense of camaraderie and companionship. There's nothing wrong with Mary Grace, Mrs. Lloyd calmly told my wide-eyed and anxious mother. She will just have to work a little harder to train herself on how to read effectively. A little harder? I worked my tail off. With nothing more than a passion to keep her daughter from failing, my mom threw herself into the task of educating me by participating in a brand new volunteer tutoring program. Under Mrs. Lloyd's supervision, my mom and other eager parents learned tutoring skills to help their children with their own learning disabilities. With Mrs. Lloyd spearheading from the classroom, my mom then shared the load by tutoring assigned students. Parents did not tutor their own children in the classroom, but rather worked with other children. Mrs. Lloyd helped transfer me to a different school, one that implemented a new program of learning called an open class concept. Progressing at the speed of individual students, this new way of teaching worked with me, and I took my first tentative steps in a challenging but successful academic path. Choosing not to split us up, Mom made the decision for Andrea to change schools also. Transferring schools was hard for Andrea, and I regret she sacrificed so much on my behalf, both then and much later. The school bus stopped at the county line, which was nearly a mile from our home, and Mom wouldn't settle for her two daughters to walk that distance alone, even if I had a picture of Donny Osmond with me. Since she had to pick us up anyway, she made the choice to drive the 10 miles extra to school every day, and she was there every afternoon to pick us up. And I would like to add that she also was there every afternoon with a snack or ready to take us to get a snack, no matter how many other children were carpooling with us. This arrangement also avoided a long bus ride full of a lot of teasing for the little girl with the eye patch and very odd-looking glasses. Gaining courage and understanding from her network of other parents and Mrs. Lloyd, Mom rolled up her sleeves and not only learned to tutor others in my school, but then worked with me one-on-one after school and into the evenings for nearly my entire schooling. Mom utilized her newfound skills as a special needs educator to spend countless hours with me as I learned to read, write, take notes, and memorize. She incorporated creative tasks, purchased boxes of supplies, and helped me not only keep up with other students, but to eventually surpass them. Through this journey, Mom modeled a foundation of diligence, hard work, and perseverance that helped define who I am today. Without any formal training and education or even a college degree, my mom, with just the sheer determination to love and nurture me, found herself becoming an expert in tutoring. Mrs. Lloyd and my mother helped organize the whole initiative that convinced the local school board to integrate special needs students into all the systems, and they had to fight that battle every year for many years. We realized early on that bright and multiple colors help stimulate parts of my brain that can compensate for my vision issues. Certain nerves simply were not connected or wired properly, so we learned to make new paths for my mind to learn. Rather than simply reading black and white text, we added audio, colors, and every other sensory input you could think of. I took notes using a tape recorder, and I read with a marker in my hand. The greatest tools that helped me overcome my learning disability were magic markers. By using bright and bold colors, my brain processed the text better, and slowly but steadily, I progressed academically. To this day, I keep a ready supply of, you guessed it, Sharpies in my purse. I love Sharpies, and I love their commercials telling consumers to use Sharpies when they want to write out loud, quote unquote. That's so funny for me. Imagine opening a grocery list that shouts at you not to forget the toilet paper and milk. That's my kind of list. During grade school, we pushed ahead with my training, and I continued showing progress, bringing home constant B's and C's on test and report cards. We all felt a level of comfort with at least Gracie's not failing. Knowing that I would not be put at the back of the class seemed to help put the family's minds at ease, and Mom's attitude slowly reflected a compensation for my eyes and learning issues. She let compassion for my difficulties dictate expectations and goals. It was almost as if I received a free pass for mediocrity because I had, quote unquote, special challenges. Growing increasingly frustrated with the amount of work required just to learn words for a spelling test, I allowed the just get by mentality to justify cheating on a spelling test one day. Of course, the only time I'd ever cheated on a test, ever, I was immediately caught by my teacher, who read me the riot act and then did the worst thing possible. She told my parents. Gracie is more than capable, but must be pushed, she told my very upset mother. With tears flowing down Carol Parker's face, she listened to this teacher state in no uncertain terms that my eyes and learning disability were to not be used as a crutch. I must set high goals and be pushed to achieve them, she told Mom. You must not feel sorry for Gracie. I don't. And she doesn't feel sorry for herself either. She can do anything she wants to. This teacher affirmed what Mrs. Lloyd said a few years earlier. With those simple words, a life philosophy was imparted. Taking this second teacher's admonition to heart, Mom redoubled her efforts and refused to allow my eyes or reading difficulties to dictate accomplishment. Although it hurt Mom to push me so hard, her diligent prodding resulted in regained academic traction, and little by little the successes mounted. Within a short time, the B's and C's gave way to an increasing number of A's, as well as a stronger, more focused work ethic. While even to this day, struggling with certain kinds of tests like standardized exams, I excelled at academics, and even at advanced placement classes, I made it through high school with a cumulative GPA of 4.2. Repeatedly rising to the occasion, Carol Parker placed herself in the gap, and she saved me from a life of mediocrity and failure. I believe teachers should know the impact they make on their students. Even though 2 key teachers intercepted me at a young age to help keep me on the path to excellence, my mom deserves to know the effect of the many times she hid her tears while pushing her daughter to achieve, the uncounted nights around the kitchen table when her heart broke as she watched me struggle with even the simplest of tasks, yet refused to let me quit. To this day, my mom still humbly minimizes her accomplishment and points to her younger sister, Dottie, as the one with the teaching gift. Aunt Dottie, who sadly passed away in 2007, taught school for years and years, taking after my grandmother Grace. But I think she was exceptionally proud of her older sister, Carol, and all she accomplished. With literally the force of her own will, she reached down, grasped an unknown courage, and led her daughter and others out of what could have resulted in tragic outcomes. In doing so, she modeled persistence, diligence, bravery, and the belief that quitting was not an option, regardless of how large the challenges. Those things would be needed again in a much more brutal circumstance.